So let's talk now about TF-IDF, one of the most successful preprocessing methods in natural language processing. So let's say that we want to find a way to discover the most important words in a corpus in order to do classification or clustering. So how can we do that? A reasonable heuristic, someone might argue, is that we can just go and use the most frequent words. However, what is wrong with this approach? Think about it for a second. Well, if you remember about Zipf's law, there are a few words that dominate each language. So in English we have some words such as the, I, and, etc. So these words occur very often, but they do not carry much meaning. So what's a solution? Well, a solution is to turn these words into stop words and then remove them from our dataset and then move on with this heuristic of using the most common words, most frequent words. However, it is impractical to have a huge list of stop words for each and every language. So what can we do? The solution is called TF-IDF. TF stands for term frequency and IDF stands for inverse document frequency. So the term frequency is the number of times a word appears in a document, and quite often we normalize this by dividing by the total number of terms in the document. The reason being that if the documents have unequal lengths, then the longer documents will just have a high frequency of this word. The inverse document frequency is defined as the logarithm of the total number of documents over the number of documents with term t in it. So what does this mean? This means that the term frequency gives more importance to frequent words. However, not all frequent words are important. The inverse document frequency gives greater weight to words that show up in a few documents. So the intuition is that for a common word such as the or I that appears in pretty much any document, the IDF will completely cancel out the TF term. So traditionally we use the logarithm in the IDF function in order to make the slope smoother, because as you can see on the left graph, if we're not using the logarithm, then IDF can very quickly go to 0, whereas if we use a logarithm, then it is much more smoother. So this is more of a heuristic. There's no real theoretical justification for us to do this, but in practice we've discovered that this formula works well. There are also some other adjustments to the term frequency formula. Again, these are heuristics, which include, for example, turning the TF term as a binary term, so whether something occurred or not, or using a logarithm, for example. But in practice, the formula that you were given in the previous slide is the most common one to be used, and it works quite well in various problems. So let's see an example. Let's say that we have 1,000 documents, and the word the appears 5,000 times in all of those 1,000 documents, and the word dog appears 100 times in 30 documents. So how would you calculate the TF and the IDF? Well, for the TF, we have 5 for the and 0.1 for dog, after using the formulas in the previous slides. If you don't remember the formulas, don't worry, these are obviously provided in the additional resources section. And for IDF, we see that the word the is essentially 0. The IDF of the word the is essentially 0, whereas for dog it's non-zero. So when we come to calculate the TF-IDF of the word the and dog, we see that the has a score of 0 and dog has a 0.347. So what we're going to do after we've calculated the scores is that we simply keep the words that have a TF-IDF only above a certain threshold, or let's say the 100 words with the highest TF-IDF score. So this helps us quickly remove any words which are going to be useless because they appear too frequently and do not convey much information. So this is used as a preprocessing step in many natural language processing tasks, and in practice it can improve performance of the models by a large margin, and at the same time it also speeds up training because we're throwing out a large chunk of our data that is not useful.